The Azure Nebula is a strange location. Hi all, Rick here, taking a look into the cerulean hues of this interstellar cloud of gas to see just what it's all about. Now, some of this information is apocryphal, such as its origin and future outside of the shows, but this also involves a timeline which was eventually collapsed, known as the First Splinter, so perhaps it can all be regarded as canon, but perhaps not. It makes for interesting lore either way. It is classified as a Class 11 nebula, filled with mainly oxygen, argon, and theta xenon, fluorine, and beryllium, and created from the supernova of FGC SR37758. This star was orbited by an M-class world called Erigol, which too was obliterated in 2168 with the supernova. Now, it wouldn't be Star Trek without an atypical supernova, and this was no exception. It shattered subspace, causing cracks to appear, snaking like natural conduits through subspace, forming a rudimentary network of tunnels. For a long while, these were undocumented, or at least unexplored, but it would become a hotbed for strange phenomena over the centuries. These passages can be navigated with some difficulty, and a secondary effect was that they created a weakness in space-time in the area. This made it susceptible to those who wanted to manipulate subspace into all sorts of fantastical effects, like time travel, universe hopping, and travelling across the Milky Way, but not without risk. It lies near to the Federation Klingon border, in the light beta quadrant, in the sector named after it. It also lies a sector or so away from the Romulan Space, at various times depending on the era we are looking at. Exploration from Starfleet began in 2256, but as a relatively fresh nebula, it was still continuing to expand. During the Federation Klingon War, however, it would have likely been a contested zone. In 2293, the USS Excelsior embarked on a mission to rescue Kirk and McCoy from Rura Penthe. However, they were not successful, with the area monitored and even patrolled by the Klingon Empire. They intercepted the Excelsior and suffered damage when a portion of the nebula was ignited by Captain Sulu's orders. However, further Klingon forces intercepted the Excelsior and forced him to abandon his rescue attempt. This is about the only canon reference to it, and it was about all the nebula saw in terms of excitement for a long time, its subspace properties still undiscovered. It was not until 2381 that the Borg actually uncovered the tunnels and began forming them into something that they could use with their expertise in creating transwarp conduits across their own territory. This was a major security issue, as the tunnels not only snaked elsewhere from the nebula, offering a strategic hub, but it dropped the Borg right into the middle of Romulan, Klingon and UFP territories. Now, in this timeline, over 7,000 Borg ships attacked from the Azure Nebula, and 300 UFP vessels were waiting to intercept. The battle did not go well, with 299 lost and the Borg advancing beyond the fleet easily. In a different timeline, that of the online games, there was also a battle with the Borg here, but it was not of the same scale. Instead, it seems to have been a Federation victory, but that would not be the end of the strangeness of the Azure Nebula. In this series of events, the Tholian Assembly began marshalling ships in the area due to their love-hate relationship with parallel universes, time travel, and other similar reality warping effects. Their presence was a little more than a nuisance, but demanded patrol and attention for some time. The Tholians continued to explore the subspace tunnels here, however, and have used this weak point in reality to peer into other timelines and universes. However, things escalated when the USS Enterprise NCC-1701C emerged from one of these subspace apertures. It seems that upon leaving the alternate timeline of yesterday's Enterprise in the next generation, it got caught in one of these subspace corridors and pulled through to 2410 and deposited in the Azure Nebula. Its failure to return to Narendra 3 led to a similarly altered timeline to exist, one where the Klingon Empire was at war with the Federation, and in this series of events, well, the Dominion arrived and triumphed over a weakened Klingon Empire and hobbled Federation. It then doled out the territories to those that were neutral or now a part of the Dominion, the Tholians receiving the Azure Nebula. In theory, this timeline was undone, but who knows with all the effects of the Azure Nebula going on. So, is a nebula like this possible? Well, I'm not even going to touch on the subspace stuff, so. Many of the fantastical images we see of nebula are colorized, although a nebula would give off some coloration, just usually imperceptible to the human eye. Nebula often appear red because of the most common element within them, hydrogen, and their radiation at the hydrogen alpha end appears red. Even when close to a nebula, you likely would not be able to see it with the naked eye because of how dispersed the particles are, because space is big, really big. Things are really far apart in space. Now, double ionized oxygen is viewed as blue, so a predominantly oxygen-based nebula would therefore be blue if you could see it. The Azure Nebula is described to be a supernova remnant diffuse nebula, in that it's basically a large cloud of gas made up of the exploded remains of a star, except that it's mostly oxygen-based with not as much hydrogen to colour it red, even though it's from a star. And it's young. By the time of, let's say, the turn of the 25th century, the Azure Nebula is only 232 years old. So can a nebula like this exist in only 200 years? 100 years? Well, yes, we've seen them. Such as the Tycho in Cassiopeia's constellation, or Kepler's supernova. Generally, however, they tend to be more spherical in appearance, considering they have yet to dissipate. So the younger the nebula, the more round it is. You do get more dispersed supernova remnants, like the Crab Nebula, which is about 65,000 light years away, but ignoring that, that nebula is 970 years old. This does contain trace oxygen, but not enough to overpower the hydrogen. However, the blue core is created by synchrotron radiation, because there is a pulsar in its centre, and its magnetic field plays a part in creating this effect. Finally, well, it could simply be reflecting the light of nearby or internal stars, like the Witch Head Reflection Nebula, but reflection nebula tend to be formed from clouds of dust, not a supernova remnant, and not so young, at least. So can it be blue? Yes, there are a myriad of reasons it could be blue, but you probably would not see it with the naked eye. Or any nebula, for that matter. Not with the vividness that we see it in the shows, at least. Here, have this blue nebula instead. Thanks for watching this breakdown on the Azure Nebula of Star Trek. While merely the site of a clash in canon, Apocrypha in several offshoot narratives turned it into this central element of time-space bending shenanigans, and that is far more interesting. Until the next lore video, I've been Rick. So long, and goodbye.